Hi there, Phil the Practical Gardener again. This particular tip is about the media that you should use for growing your seedlings in. I've already produced a video recently about suitable containers such as these ones that you can see here, and I've actually done a range of other ones about growing seedlings on once they've developed and then planting them out in the garden. I will also be producing ones soon about sowing directly into the garden, sowing in the cold season, and then collecting and saving seeds. So be sure to look at my playlist about growing seed. All of these topics are coordinated together, and also subscribe to my channel so that you will see the remaining ones as they become available over the coming months. In this particular tip, I'm going to be discussing the seed's needs for nutrients and also for moisture holding and drainage, which is more to do with aeration really in a way than drainage itself. Then I'll look at issues to do with hygiene, and then at the end I'll discuss 3 possible media that you could choose to use. First of all, a specialist commercial propagation media, which is the most effective way really. Then how you can home make your own out of potting mix, which is actually what I do. It's more economical. And then finally, whether you should use your compost as a seed raising medium. There are of course other specialist media that are used for growing seeds, such as agar, which is a seaweed extract, and sphagnum moss. However, I'm only going to be talking about the ones that you would use for the general range of crops that you would be growing, such as flowers, such as the zinnias and sunflowers that I'm raising here, or vegetables such as these tomatoes and the herb basil that I've got, and peas. So without more ado, let's get into it. First of all, I'll talk a little bit about nutrients. A commercial seed raising media such as the one I'm showing here has got slow release fertilizer pellets in it, and the particular one I'm showing you will actually give nutrients for up to 9 months. And while that's fine, personally I don't really see the point to that. You are not actually going to keep the seedlings in these type of containers for anything like that length of time. Shortly I'll be planting these out into my garden. If you were to use a control release fertilizer, I would suggest a shorter term would actually be more effective. It's certainly a very safe option, however it's quite an expensive one. So if you're using a controlled release fertilizer, it's going to be more pricey. If it's already in the medium, then you will be paying extra for that medium. I'll just talk a little bit about the biology of the seedlings. Seeds actually contain a source of nutrients within their stored food part of their seed. I'll just show you on these tomatoes. First of all, they develop their root, just a taproot usually, and then they develop a short stem that has 2 seedling leaves which have actually come from inside the seed, and they then photosynthesize and start to build up food for the next stage of growth. Up to that time they don't need external nutrients because they've actually got them internally. Certainly after that they will need it. So what I do is I actually obtain a much cheaper general fertilizer, which is a soluble one, not a control release one, and I just sprinkle that lightly on when the seeds have reached that stage or are about to pass it, because I can actually see when these true leaves, as they're called, are starting to develop. And that's actually when I start to sprinkle just a light dressing of cheap fertilizer on that. I do that several times over the growing period, say about 3 weeks apart. So they don't actually need external nutrients on the early stages, and then they do need a reasonable amount to develop. Don't put on too much or you might burn them. Next I'll talk about water holding. So seedlings are very vulnerable to drying out. Just a day or two of dryness, they will desiccate and die. The media that we do use in our propagation mixes is materials such as a fine bark, pumice, perlite. These will actually retain a reasonable amount of moisture so that it will be available to the seedlings. That is why commercial mixes and the mixes that I make always contain those ingredients. You wouldn't use something such as a very coarse sand or fine pebbles because they wouldn't hold any moisture at all. They would dry out in no time and they wouldn't retain nutrients either. Some specialist mixtures do actually contain a wetting agent or crystals which will actually help to retain moisture. I personally don't bother to use that because I am quite vigilant about the watering of my plants. However, if you're not so watchful about the watering, it might be wise to buy one that contains some of those materials. That'll be advertised on the packet. Next, I'll discuss drainage. The need for drainage is more to do with the need for air or aeration or oxygen. So the developing roots need a large amount of oxygen to actually develop. This media, for example, is actually quite coarse, and so it drains very readily, and as it drains it draws air into that, and that air is vital for nurturing the roots. Next, I'll discuss adhesion. So as the root hairs develop, they need to be able to adhere to the media. So you do need the moisture holding grains of media, you need the moisture around it, which is why you need the watering, but you need the air between them so that the plants can get the oxygen that they need. I'll just show you on an example. This is a weed actually that had come up on my seedling, and you can see there's lots and lots of fine hairs, so the roots are holding on to the media there, and that is how they're getting moisture and in fact nutrients. Showing you that weed was actually quite convenient because it leads on to my final topic, which is having weed-free media. If you purchase a proprietary commercial seed raising mixture, it will be free from weed seeds. You can be pretty well guaranteed, and also from pests and diseases. That media will have been disinfected to ensure that that is the case. To me, the disease aspect is not actually that important because disease spores are actually floating in the air all the time, so they will actually find their way into your media very, very quickly. I consider it more important to think about the way that you manage your seeds once they've been sown, and also your seedlings. That is good airflow, good sunlight, and good watering practice. I simply buy a cheap potting mix or potting media, and I sieve it because it does have large slivers of sapwood wood that have remained in that media after the composting process, and also perhaps particles of bark. And they're really too large for the seedlings to adhere to. And it is a nuisance when you want to prick your seedlings out or pot them up. So I have a large sieve which I give it a good sieving, and I use the sievings, that is the coarse material, as a mulch in my garden, so I don't waste it. But the fine material which is left, I then use that as a media. There will be some weeds, as I just showed you, but really there won't be very many at all. There could be disease, but as I mentioned before, the disease will come into your media very, very quickly anyway. So that's a more economical way of doing it. I sieve it, and then I use it for sowing, and then I do add the nutrients after the seedlings have emerged. Finally, compost. If you purchased commercially made compost, there will still be those large slivers which you should remove. If you're making your own homemade compost, there will be some degree of large organic matter, which again you can sieve out, but it will be a better material regarding its nutrient status, moisture holding, and aeration. So in theory it should be quite a good material, and I have seen it used. The problem is when I've seen it used by gardeners, invariably there do seem to be a lot of weed seeds in that. So when these seedlings develop, usually there is competition from weeds, worse than you would get from the sieved potting media that I purchase. You could use it, but I think I'd be a little bit careful about it, just based on general observation. So that's it for this topic. Just a reminder to keep an eye on my playlist for other aspects about seed growing. I do find it very worthwhile. I grow a lot of seedlings one way or another, direct sowing as well as in container, thousands of them through the year. I do actually give quite a lot of these away. So that's a good way of helping my friends and neighbours. And also I do save a considerable amount of money by doing that. And it is really, really exciting to watch these coming on during the growing season. It's the magic, the miracle of birth. Hopefully you like this tip, because that does help my channel to grow. Share it with others who you think might be interested in this. And finally, thank you very much for watching this video through to the end.